Japan's host club industry, at least in the form that it has taken since the industry's inception, is essentially finished. After being the backbone of countless social problems in Japan, issues that became increasingly exposed post-2020 through social media, the Japanese government has finally brought into effect a new set of extensive laws on June 28, 2025 that ban the core methods in which many of the Japanese host clubs fundamentally relied on in order to generate the majority of their profits. And the result? Host clubs in Japan now stand at the final crossroads of either having to shut down or completely reinvent the way in which they conduct their business. But first of all, what exactly are host clubs? The Wikipedia description of a host club seems innocuous enough. To quote, host clubs are adult entertainment establishments where male employees, known as hosts, entertain customers by providing them with food, drinks, and conversation. But then, if you are to look at the actual lifestyle of many of these so-called hosts of Japan, things do not really add up. If their job really is to just simply entertain customers by providing them with food, drinks, and conversation, literally just sitting there, providing peanuts and drinks and chatting, how are they pulling in their self-proclaimed 7 to 8 figure annual salaries and be able to afford to buy new Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces every other month? Well, because in actual reality, what they really do in order to take money out of their female clients' pockets goes far beyond just handing out peanut snacks and topping up their champagne glasses. Let's go on and walk through the most classic methods that many hosts used to generate revenue before the legal changes in 2025 through a short story that we have created based on recent real-life events. An 18-year-old Japanese girl, Moka, just moved to Japan's capital city of Tokyo for university. She was born and raised in the countryside region of Japan until high school, so had extremely high hopes for her new city life, making new friends, doing well in school, and so on. But then, connecting with people turned out to be a much harder challenge than she previously imagined. She had trouble actively approaching new people due to her naturally shy personality, and when she finally gathered the courage to do so, their reactions were all rather lukewarm, to put it most mildly, making her feel that the city folks in Tokyo were just way too cold and distant. And by the time she turned 20, Moka has finally had enough. While alone and lonely in her tiny Tokyo one-bedroom apartment, she downloaded a dating app and registered her profile. And soon enough, she matched with and received a message from a young man, Masa, who was in his mid-20s. In her eyes, someone who was extremely good-looking. They first met in person at a cafe, then had a dinner date 2 days later. And just 4 days afterwards, Masa formally asked her of whether she would be his girlfriend. Moka, overflowing with joy, said yes. And for the first week or so, Moka feels as if she's in heaven. She feels like she finally has someone who's willing to listen to her and actually cares for her as a person. But then on one day, her boyfriend makes a confession. He said that he was in fact a host working at a host club, and that he was in serious trouble because he was late to his work shift for the day, meaning that he had to pay a late fine to the host club where he worked in. But then, he says that there's a rule at the host club of how if he brings along a female client, he does not have to pay a fine, even if he's late. So he begs Moka to just come along with him to his host club for only 1 day, and asked her to just sit there together with him for a few hours. Now, all of this was, of course, a big fat lie. There was no fine that he had to pay for being late, as this was a clever trick that was already being prominently utilized by many hosts across Japan in order to get a female client to first step foot inside of their host club. Due to its social stigma and being a part of the night entertainment industry, the hosts know that many young women in Japan initially do not feel comfortable being associated with the whole host club scene, meaning that getting a woman to step inside the host club for the first time was usually the hardest part for the male host. So they actually had a repertoire of strategies to make a young woman enter a host club for the initial time, such as saying how they were late for their work shift and had to pay a late fine if they go alone, or how they could not hit their monthly minimum client number, so needed their girlfriend to just come and sit there at the host club for a few hours to just meet the required numbers for the month, and so on. Now, Moka obviously felt quite uneasy about the whole situation, but she trusted that her boyfriend Masa was telling the truth, thus decided to go along with him to his host club for just this one time. Once she sat down at the club, Masa also placed himself next to her and thanked her once again for saving him. He stated that he actually hates being a host and wanted to quit this work as fast as possible once he has made enough money for him to open up a small cafe that he one day dreamt of running. Now, Moka's first visit at the host club actually went exactly as Masa previously promised. She just sat there and talked with her boyfriend for a couple of hours. And the club did not charge anything outrageous. She only paid 2,000 yen, which is around $13 for the light snack and drink that she had. Few weeks have passed, and Moka feels that her relationship with Masa has gotten deeper than ever. He came to her apartment every weekend and cooked delightful meals for her, such as homemade pasta. They made love, and afterwards, always talked about their future together that was ahead. How they were going to get married, have 2 kids, and happily run their dream cafe in Shimokitazawa together. Moka was beyond enamored with Masa, and her life completely evolved around him. However, as the weeks went by, it became progressively more difficult for Moka to get in touch with her boyfriend. And every time she managed to get in contact with him, he told her that he was just too busy with work. During their phone call, he told Moka, "Can't you see that I'm doing all of this in order to be financially set for our future together?" Then, he told her that if she really wanted to see him, she should come by to his host club. Now, Moka was in a dilemma. She knew that although she only paid 2,000 yen at the host club during her first visit, as the club had discount privileges for first-time comers, the amount that she had to pay at the club will get much higher during her next visit. And as a university student who still relied on the 60,000 yen, which is around $385 monthly pocket money from her parents, she knew that she will rapidly run out of money if she began to frequent the host club. But then, one text message from Masa was all more than enough for Moka. He texted, "Don't you miss me?" And her answer to that question was a resounding yes. So there she headed to Masa's host club for the second time. Weeks went by, and Moka has now come to the point that she was visiting her boyfriend Masa's host club multiple times per week. And every time she went, he asked her whether she could order a champagne for him. He told her that this will lead him to rank higher in the club's host sales rankings, which will allow him to make more money, which will then accelerate the process of him quitting the job, get married to Moka, and start their new life together. And for Moka, whose raison d'etre at this point in her life was to create her future together with her boyfriend, or rather, her soon-to-be husband Masa, how could she possibly say no to this, right? So there she was, purchasing an expensive champagne for her boyfriend on a nightly basis at the host club. But then, Moka soon ran out of money, and when she informed Masa of this, he told her, "Don't worry about it. You can use our club's irikake system and pay for these champagnes later when you have the money." And that is what Moka exactly did for the subsequent few weeks, leading her to soon be in debt of over 4 million Japanese yen, or around $26,000. Then on one day, Masa gave Moka a call. He asked, "Hey Moka, do you have the money now to pay back on all the unpaid bills that you have on irikake?" And needless to say, her answer to that question was a no. Masa, sounding distressed, told her that if she does not pay back the money by next month, he'll essentially be done for at the host club and be fired. In a cautious tone, he then asked her, "How about you begin working at a kyabakura to pay off your debt?" To elaborate, a kyabakura is a Japanese nightlife establishment where female hostess drank together and engaged in intimate conversations with their patrons sitting right next to them. Moka was reluctant to say yes to this, as she knew that for many young women, becoming a kyabajo was often a gateway into the deeper parts of the Japanese night entertainment industry, gradually leading into other adult industry jobs, such as becoming a, let's just say, actress for a certain type of adult-only videos, and other various types of nightwork establishments. But then, knowing that she essentially had no other way to pay back on her host club debt, she decided to work at the kyabakura establishment that was introduced by her boyfriend. Few months have passed, and Moka has now turned into a full-time kyabajo. She intensely disliked her job. She hated having to sit next to old men and pretend to be interested in talking about topics that she, quite frankly, could not give a single care about, while simultaneously having to constantly make sure that they don't sit too close to her and start making physical contact. But this was all okay, as she was now able to purchase an expensive champagne set for her boyfriend every time she visited his host club and help him rise in his host club popularity rankings. But for some reason, the champagne set that her boyfriend told her to buy was getting more expensive in prices every time, meaning that despite working at the kyabakura, her urikake, or unpaid bills on the host club, was still growing exponentially. And on one day, Masa, while looking somewhat hesitant, made a suggestion to Moka. Moka, I hate having to bring this up to you, but your debt on the host club is out of control. So again, I really do not want to say this, but how about you consider working at a soapland during the day, while still continuing with your kyabakura work at night? It will provide you with another source of income, and I will never think any less of you for doing that kind of work, as I know that you're doing it, all for our future together. Let's quickly finish all of this night industry work, and get married by the next year. Moka felt tears welling in her eyes. Her boyfriend was now telling her to conduct the type of work that she never once in her life ever dreamt of doing. But then, she also knew that in order to pay off the 9 million yen debt owed to the host club, she had no other option. And Masa clearly told her that doing that kind of work will not make him think any less of her. In fact, he told her that this will make him love her even more, as he could see how much she was willing to sacrifice for him. So there she headed to the soapland establishment that Masa introduced. By working at the soapland from morning into the early afternoon, and at a kyabakura at night, Moka was now making more money than ever before. Of course, she was not spending any of this on herself, as all of her income was spent towards paying back on her host club debt. And if she had any finances left over, spent it on purchasing a champagne tower for her boyfriend. Her mind and body, in the case of the latter, quite literally, were in shambles every day. But when she saw the large smile on Masa's face every time she ordered a champagne tower for him at his host club, all of her pain temporarily vanished. Yet for some reason, she felt that her boyfriend was distancing himself from her more and more as the weeks went by. Whenever she tried to hold hands with him when they were walking together on the street in Kabukicho, he sternly told her not to do so, as he said that there could be other clients or another host industry personnel watching, and it was not a good look. And then, one day, Moka's life finally shattered to pieces. While she was trudging through Kabukicho for her work shift at the soapland, she saw her boyfriend Masa happily holding hands with another girl while gently caressing her hair with the other. They buoyantly walked towards his luxury sports car, which Moka never knew that he had throughout their entire relationship. And at that exact moment, Moka came to a piercing realization of the truth. She has sold her mind and body, all for nothing. Now, we used the name Moka for our short story, but Moka's life story is actually very similar to the one of Watanabe Mai, or Riri-chan, whose story we have previously covered in depth on our channel. Please check out the video if you're interested. At the time when Mai was arrested by the Japanese police for the selling of her romance scam manuals, Moka's lifestyle was exactly the one that Mai had in real life. In her prison diary, Mai confessed that she worked at a soapland in the mornings to the early afternoons, and either worked at a kyabakura or did standing work at night. And this was all in order to give all of her earnings to her host, who is this guy, Tanaka Hiroshi. This is all public information, by the way, as Tanaka frequently flaunted all of the cash in which Mai handed over to him on his YouTube channel. And from our short story of Moka, we can precisely see some of the fundamental methods in which a large number of hosts used in order to increase their sales numbers. First, the prominent usage of romance scams make the young woman think that she was in a romantic relationship with the host, promising marriage, asking the young women to purchase expensive drinks in order for the host to be able to quit this work faster and build a future together with the young women, and the list goes on. It is no secret now in Japan that many hosts have been relying on these cunning romance scam methods with all the anecdotal stories that have came out. Not to mention literal romance scam manuals in which the Japanese host clubs gave out to their new hosts, being disclosed to the public for the first time in the recent years. Inside the manuals, we can see that hosts specifically targeted young women exactly like Moka in order to engage in their romance scams. For their scam target criteria, the manual states, make her your girlfriend. She has to work during the day. Just over 20 years old. Has absolutely no prior knowledge about hosts. So in essence, to use the exact wording that was utilized inside their host manual, easiest targets of their mind control. The reason why they specifically targeted young women compared to, let's say, a woman over 30 who actually may have more money than a woman who just turned 20 is because the younger girls, almost always, are less experienced and easier to emotionally manipulate compared to an older aged woman.
結婚を約束してる。
はい、します。絶対に。
いつ頃結婚する予定なんですか？
2年後。
An older individual who has previously dated different types of men and has already seen some of the bad boy, night industry working men will most likely see through it straight away if a host attempts one of their romance scam strategies. But for a girl like Moka, who has literally just recently got out of her teenage period in life, they are much more likely to fall for the romance scam, mind control magic utilized by the male host. However, with that said, it is now downright illegal for the hosts in Japan to leverage these manipulative scams against young women.
女性に借金を負わせて、で売春をさせて資金を得させるっていうこういう非常に卑劣な営業手法、悪質ホストクラブの営業手法に対しては徹底的にあらゆる法律を駆使して取り締まりをする。
To elaborate, under the new Entertainment and Amusement Business Act, which came into effect on June 28, 2025, if a host is found with any evidence of saying something to their female client in the lines of, "Our relationship will end if you do not come and drink at my host club. We will never be able to see each other again if you do not refill the bottle. I need higher sales numbers in order for us to live together," then the host will receive criminal penalties of business suspension, imprisonment for up to 6 months, or a fine of up to 1 million yen. So straight to prison if they cannot find the right type of lawyer. Secondly, if we think back to Moka's story, we could see that the host Masa was eager to introduce Moka, initially to a kyabakura, then to a soapland. Not only give her the idea that she should work in those occupations, but suggest her the very specific shops in Kabukicho that he thinks will be good for her to work in. And the reason why Masa was so keen on this was because for many hosts in Japan, this was actually one of the main methods in which they used to create a portion of their monthly profits. To explain, when a host introduces a young woman to a night entertainment or a escort establishment, they were given quite a hefty referral fee, referred to as scout kickbacks in Japan. Again, this was no small amount. Not only did they receive upfront referral payments if the young woman whom they brought successfully began working at the establishment, they also often received 10 to 20% of the monthly earnings that the young woman made from the night work establishment every month.
風俗に関しては紹介してその子が働いてその中の稼ぎのだいたい 10% から 20% がバックとしてその子が働いている限り入る。
So for the hosts, a lucrative, steady source of passive income. And this did not only include making a young woman work at an escort establishment only in Japan, but also for such establishments located in foreign countries as well, such as other developed East Asian nations, as in the case of South Korea or Taiwan. It became widespread news a few months ago in Japan when a number of young Japanese women were found working illegally in South Korea. And after investigation, it was found that they were forced to work overseas in order to repay the debt owed to the host clubs.
ホストから抜け出してなくてタワーとか一番大きいの多分500か。それで頑張るしかないかみたいな。日本に比べるとそのルールというか縛りも少ないから楽して稼げるかなみたいな。
But now, this is no longer possible for the hosts. Under the new law in Japan, acts of not only forcefully demanding, but luring customers through seduction into working in night work establishments or to appear in adult videos will result in criminal punishment. And needless to say, the newly revised Employment Security Act prohibits night entertainment establishments from providing scout kickbacks to the hosts, and both parties will be subject to criminal punishment if they are found to have violated the new law. Let us go over the rest of the remaining bans in a quick fashion. Overt, sensational advertising tactics frequently adopted by the host clubs, using phrases such as over 1 billion yen in annual sales, number 1 nominated host, over 140 million yen monthly raking host, god of host, etc. have now all been made illegal. That is why if you are to walk over to Kabukicho right now, most male host billboards will have their sensational advertising phrases either cover the blacked out under police order. And it goes without saying that if a host is found with evidence of telling their mind-controlled female client a sentence in the lines of can you purchase a champagne tower for me today so that I can move up to being the #1 selling host at our host club for this month? They will now face criminal charges. Host clubs operating without a license will be handled with much harsher criminal penalties than before. Prior to 2025, if a host club owner was found to be operating without a license, they were subject to imprisonment of up to 2 years and a fine of up to 2 million yen. But now, they are subject to imprisonment of up to 5 years and a fine of up to 10 million yen. And so, as Japan walks into 2026, the country is now standing at the tail end of one of the most notorious social industries created in the nation's modern history. Again, at least for the version that has existed since the industry's birth. For decades, host clubs thrived on a business model that relied on loneliness, manipulation, and the emotional vulnerabilities of Japan's young women, the easiest targets of their so-called mind control.
結婚を約束してる。
します。絶対に。
They were able to operate in the shadows of technical legality, not because their actions were harmless, but because the system never properly acknowledged the full scale of the damage. And quite frankly, the big powerful figures in the host club industry probably lobbied the brains out of some corrupt government legislators for decades through Japan's infamous pillow business culture to keep the regulations at bay. But now, with the revised Entertainment and Amusement Business Act, as well as the revised Employment Security Act, finally in effect, the very pillars that allowed many of the hosts to flamboyantly boast earnings that were often more than 100 times the salary of a normal, hard-working Japanese salaryman has been legally dismantled. The romance scams, the mind control manuals, the scout kickbacks, the coercion into S-work, the weaponization of affection, and the manufacturing of fantasy love for profit. All of them have finally been brought into the daylight. What happened to Moka in our short story? What happened to Watanabe Mai in real life? What happened to countless unnamed girls whose stories were never documented, never reported, never believed before the age of social media, are no longer just tragic anecdotes whispered online. They are now acknowledged by the law as criminal acts. Now, host clubs will not disappear overnight. Some will adapt and come into acceptance of far smaller profits on their ethical practices. Some will rebrand, and some will, unfortunately, undoubtedly find loopholes in the new regulations. But the era where hosts could openly exploit young women, push them into debt, or funnel them into the night industry under the guise of romance is officially over.